Hey, this is Kaizoku Uncharted. We're a couple of siblings from the vast sea of anime. If you think this is the crew for you, set sail with us each week. I'm Jakia.
And this is Justin. So we're gonna discuss the show I Parry Everything.
Yes.
A show I felt kind of strong about when I first saw it. So I was like, we gotta watch this thing. So, with that being said, Kia, do you have a synopsis? And what is your stance on watching I Parry Everything?
Okay. Yes, I do have a synopsis. Let me pull it up. Hold on. Okay. The Kingdom of Clays faced a dire crisis. An assassination attempt has just been made on its own Princess Lindbergh, and its neighboring countries eye the aftermath like starving vultures, plotting the kingdom's downfall. The ensuing conflict will shape the face of the continent for centuries to come, but Noor doesn't have a clue about any of that. Having freshly arrived at the royal capital after a decade of rigorous, isolated training at his mountain home, he's dead set on achieving his childhood dream of becoming an adventurer, even if the only skills he possesses are useless ones. Sure, he can parry thousands of swords in the span of a single breath, but everybody knows you need more than that if you want to be an adventurer. Our hero's road to making his dream come true will be long and arduous, but if there's one thing Nora's not afraid of, it's some good old-fashioned hard work. I love this show. I love this show because it's ridiculous. We were talking about before we started recording. It's like there've been a lot of shows of recent to have like OP characters, and it's just ridiculous.
Okay.
And it's the right amount of ridiculous. It's not like too,
It's not too ridiculous.
It's not too ridiculous where it's just like, I can't watch this no more or whatever. It's just like, got it. I love how Noor doesn't know anything of the world. I'm just like, what is going on with I was like, there was a point where he said, once I leave, it's like a barrier.
Yeah, it looked like a barrier.
It looked like a barrier. I said, well, where were you? I said, you weren't a part of this country. You weren't part of the other country. Like, you were in some other dimension. Like, what's going on? I was confused.
I blame the parents.
I mean, 100%, but he didn't have any, because his parents died when he was young. Like, I think he was probably 7 at the time when they both, passed. And so I'm also like, he did pretty well for a kid trying to figure out
100%.
what's going on. Like, there were moments where, trial and error. He died from, like, foraging. Like, he got poisoned by foraging things in the forest. Which comes to help us out much later. I mean, I just feel like, I just love how he just doesn't know anything about the world, and he just really underestimates, like, his abilities.
Mm-hmm. A classic.
Which is classic, but I think it's to a huge degree. Like, the fact that he's just like, oh, that's a cow. I said, this is not a cow.
Oh, I like to think I was just as ridiculous as this show. Because, you brought up, the point of the cow. I was just like, is this a demon or a cow?
Right. I was like, what's going on? And he's just like, oh, man, that's one big cow. I said, in what world? I said, where are we?
His world. I was also concerned. I was like, and it's little ignorant things, but I just left one big note to me was like, oh my God, we're leaving the farm animals unattended.
For a while. And I don't know why he thought they would be fine when he came back from, like, years of training.
But self-sufficient.
He left when he was a kid. I don't know. So I'm giving him that grace. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this show. I wasn't expecting it. So basically, like, Noor becomes, like, he decides that he's like, hey, I'm going to leave the homestead and go out into the world and become an adventurer, because this is what I learned in the books from the stories that my dad would tell me. And he goes into town as like a young boy. I think he was like 11 or 12 at the time. He goes into town. The adventure girl's like, hey, you gotta have some type of skill. Go, you're lucky our kingdom provides training for free. I said, this is great. He was looking out for him. I said, that's great. So he goes to one school.
He spent 3 years.
Yeah, he spent like 3 months. It's like, was it 3 or 6 months? Like, at a time for each one.
Right.
And then, like, I guess during the training split, your skills are supposed to manifest. It never happened. And then they just send him on to another school. They're just like, hey, maybe you got some gifts elsewhere. But he always learned something. but not enough.
But there was 3 years of this.
Yeah, it was 3 years because there was a couple of schools, so he had to do it. Because, like, you know, he was like, I'm going to try to do swordsmanship. I'm going to try to become a shield. Or maybe I'll try healing. Or maybe I'll try magic. Or like a thief. All these things. And he just basically learns the basic skills,
right? Basic
of each
yeah.
one, and he's just like, man, this is disappointing. But I think what bothered me the most, because we don't find this out until at the very end, which is fine. And they're just like, man, it's so impressive that he was able to learn all this stuff because he didn't have any it's like he didn't have like the latent the actual like blessings for the things, and so they're just like, yo, he was able to determine and like develop these gifts and skills just from like hard work and consistency, and that in itself is like a huge blessing. Sure. And so I was just like, okay, but none of y'all tried to tell him this beforehand, because he was like very dejected and disappointed and went back to
yeah, like they all clearly have like some admiration for him, but was never told to him.
Never told to him.
Because like there are always times like, if only he was here, you know.
And it's like he ends up becoming like an urban legend amongst all the schools. They're just like, yeah, we heard about this man named Noor. Like, he trained all the time and never got any. It was wild. It was wild. But then he finally, you know, years go by. And he's like, I'm going to do whatever it takes. Like, I'm going to try again. I
like the perspective. Okay. It was all over the place.
It really was.
Yeah. You know, first they hit us with a classic pass introduction. I'm like, cool. Right. Then we know it's 15 years later. Excellent.
I love a timestamp.
Right. And then they give me timestamps. They let us know, hey, he stayed at these schools for 3 years. They let us know he's able to parry 100 swords in one breath. But then 10 years after that, constantly training, now he can 1,000. Right. You know, I'm like, give me information. Like, that's what I need to know. All the while, he's still an F rank, which is the lowest of the low, apparently.
And he was just like, I'm like, that's right, Noor, take that with pride. So he was like, he can do the bare minimum task that no one wants to do around town. So that was great.
So after we kind of get a sense of what we are. He's doing running-the-mill jobs in the town.
Yes, people know him.
They know of him, you know. So we're like, hey, you know, cleaning gutters, mining, like he's this is construction. This is what he does.
He said, he said there's more than one way to be an adventurer, you know.
And we eventually meet Lynn. Or Lady Lindbergh, however you want to say it, and we meet Ines. And I'm just confused. Like right away, she is told, or we are told of her that she's the maid, and I'm just like, in all this armor, like what are we doing?
I mean, well, no, I don't even think that. I think he just assumed. I think that's part about it. He's like,
he
just assumed.
That's part of his ignorance, which I love.
Was like, these are crazy assumptions. I said, this is wild. This is wild.
He did, yeah. I forgot. I did put this down. He said, is she the maid? How can she clean with these heavy clothes on?
Absolutely. And I was like, no. I'm like, no, Noor. So there are just moments where I was just like, come on.
We also meet Gilbert.
Yeah.
I'm kind of okay with Gilbert, the spearsman. He's okay.
I feel like he's fine. I think I think like the running thing is like everybody over. I think it's like, it's funny. It was like he underestimates his skill. Like Noor underestimates his abilities, and then everyone that comes across him is like overestimates him a little bit.
Especially Lynn.
Lynn.
Lynn wants him to be our teacher.
So yeah, I'm okay with Gilbert. I think Gilbert's like, he did the right thing. He was like, I need to test this person out. I think the thing that annoys me throughout the show is like he's defeating these high like A rank demons or monsters.
Threat level A demons.
And no one tells him. They're just like, he's like, oh yeah, I defeated that cow, or it was just a cow, or it's just like, oh, that's a frog. I said, okay. And then she's like, you mean the dragon? And he's like, yeah, that frog. Like, I'm sorry, right? And I'm just like, no one tells him or corrects him of like what's happening. And so I'm just like, come on.
I get it's one of those things like ignorance is bliss, maybe.
I suppose. I don't know.
But then we start as the story progresses.
Or even with the goblin, he was just like, He said this. He said these are how all goblins are. Like I'll never underestimate them again. I said this is an emperor goblin.
Right. That's why he's like, no wonder I'm saying F-rank adventurer. It's like he's like, man, adventures are amazing.
Right.
It's like so are you.
But anyways, like you were saying.
But as we start to progress through the story, we constantly get to see backgrounds from the other schools.
Yes.
Like you said, Noor, he's able to use the ability Tiny Flame, but he can't learn anything else.
Right.
But we find out his Tiny Flame is bigger than that of Sage Oaken, who runs the school. We find out all his basic abilities are actually extraordinary.
And even at the very end, we saw like this means just like briefly like we go. Orkin does his like backstory. He was like, yeah, he was dual casting in less than like 6 months, and he was just like, how is that possible? But never said nothing to him and just let him leave. So yeah, we find out that all of his skills are extraordinary.
And we find that out because Lynn used her flame, and he's like, "Oh, all I can do is Tiny Flame." And then when she saw it, she's like, "I gotta investigate this."
She's like,
"These aren't looking right."
She's like, "Man, look how powerful this! Like his flame is huge. Like in what world? In what world?"
And then I like how some of the episodes start where it's like the split perspective. It's his perspective, then it's Lynn's perspective.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, I can get on board with this. And then, like you said, eventually, after we handled the cow, we come across the goblin.
Right.
And we come across a goblin emperor, which is a subspecies of the goblin king. And it's an extreme threat. And I'm just like, the show is just full of nothing but misunderstandings.
Right after the other. One after the other.
You know, because like the people misunderstand though, because like at one point they're like, did he accept knowing this was here so he can eliminate it since no one else can? Like this is what Lynn thought, and absolutely. It's like no,
like, that's not it at all.
We're just trying to live our life, and other than that, it's just like okay. It looks like at one point we started being secretly watched. Yes. So it's just like, who's watching us? Uh-huh. Like, we have concerns. And then eventually, which only makes the most sense, with all these creatures in the nearby area, eventually the city comes under attack.
Right.
Apparently there's some shield corps. There's tons of goblin emperors. So it only helps feed his mindset.
Oh my gosh, look at all these goblins.
Right. So, and then we start to find out some of the lore. Demon folk apparently was almost drove to extinction.
Right.
And you know, then we start to see what is because whoever is the we can start putting someone in the book.
Oh, absolutely. We could put he's referred. We didn't get his name until much later, and we didn't even really get his name. But they mentioned him as like the Beastmaster or something like that, because he was the one that was dealing with the demon folk children.
Right.
And then I was just like, man, they need to like all these I was like, man, they just be scouting these orphanages like no one's business. Like this is outrageous. But he can totally go into the book. He can definitely go into the book because he was awful. But then Rolo's like, well, he's always kept his word. I said, well, all his words have been like words of violence.
Or words of lies.
Something, yeah. So I was just like, but he was under the impression, he was like, I'll do what he says. But yeah, we learned about the demon folk and basically how the other kingdom, which is very relentless about trying to get our resources from the dungeon, which is crazy. I was just like, give it a rest. Like, it's not that deep or that serious. And basically the beast master or tamer was like given the assignment to like basically carry out this massive assault on our kingdom, on the kingdom of clay.
It was a pretty big assault.
It was pretty big. Like my real question is like, how did he get some of these beasts in the first place?
100%.
I was like, because he's relying on the fact that all these kids that are the demon folk are going to be able to control them. But I'm just like, have they been trained? I don't
know if that's the case. Because remember,
we haven't even seen the other kids.
Well, not even that. Yeah. Remember, we find out like the frog or dragon.
It's a dragon, but in the words of Noor, it's a frog.
We were under the. We find out the creature, once it gets to its destination, is meant to eat the kids.
Right.
So I don't think any trainers needed. Like, if anything, it's almost like maybe a deal was made between this beast tamer guy, because it's like, hey, this food's gonna lead you, and then you eat the food at your destination. Like that's what this dragon was prepared to do, was prepared to eat the kid. At the same time, we find out more lore because we meet the former S-rank adventurer, Dead Man Zadu.
He's a bad man.
Yeah, because we find out even all the instructors advise in avoiding him.
They said, nah, he's dead man, but he's not. They call him a dead man because they're just like, we have to tell people that he's dead, or else they're gonna try
to go after
him, and
they'll die
absolutely immediately. And they're just like
he's like, too strong for anyone.
Like he doesn't turn. He's like neutral, chaotic. He said whoever pays.
At the age of 13, he became a dragon slayer. So he's ridiculous. And Noor and him were throwing. This is all while Noor's poisoned. Like,
absolutely. This goes back to like we learned earlier, like from him being like as a kid being like foraging and developing a tolerance to all these poisons. And it worked out. He was like, oh cool, I can work through this. And then Inez and Leonard just like, he's dead, like it's too late for him. And he's just like still out there holding it down. I was just like, and it was crazy because Inez was like, no, we're not going to help him. He's fine.
Yeah, hey, Inez has priorities. The priorities is to protect Lynn. Okay? Yeah. She can't just be worried about all these things. She can't.
But him and the dude were throwing down, and the dude was like, this is interesting. He was like, nothing's working.
Yeah, he just kept trying.
And he was just like, you're breaking all my good stuff. And he's like, I'm sorry. He said, I don't want an apology. I'm just saying it's weird. It's just weird.
And like you said, how are they getting all these creatures? Because at some point, the Dragon of Calamity is also starting to show up.
Absolutely, because Rolo's like, hey, the beast that I'm taking is small fry, because the beast master was like, oh, the next one is going to be out of this world. And like you said before, it makes me question, like, how did he get it? Because I'm like, this beast, this dragon is a proper dragon. This is an ancient dragon.
It looks like a real dragon.
Right. And then I'm just like, there's no way that this man was able to tame this ancient beast. Because, like, when the beast finally gets to town and, Nora's like, hey, I don't ever want to experience this thing again with Lynn doing the power with the wind. He's like, oh, God.
When she sends him flying.
So he sends him flying. She sends him flying again so he can make it to town in time for the calamity that's about to happen. And, like, he's parrying everything. And everyone in the town and everyone outside of the town, apparently they got good vision because they're seeing this fight play by play. And everyone's just shocked about what's happening. And the dragon becomes furious and is just, like, very prideful. Like, no, I'm the strongest being. Like, this is true. And then he ends up being humbled throughout this entire fight. And then Nora's just like, man.
Well, let's not forget.
The other people.
The king almost sacrificed himself.
He did.
To use the weapon needed to apparently try to stop the Calamity Dragon.
Right.
Which apparently might not have worked anyway. So he just would have sacrificed himself. But yes, when the dragon is introduced, the dragon is all powerful. The dragon is that one. And then once he's fighting Noor, you start to see the dragon internally talking to himself, and it's like, the one who is weak, the one who is small, is me. And like that's what he's like, I can't beat this dude. So he like submits to Noor, and then
Noor's like, Rolo, you're great. He said, look how powerful you are, Rolo. You can do anything.
You're able to tame this thing? And he's like,
no.
He's like, it wasn't me. He's like, you're being modest.
He's like, and everyone's like, he's like, yeah, look what Rolo did, everybody. And Rolo's like, I'm not the master, y'all. I'm not.
Hey, so Rolo's gonna have a home. He was doing all this like, hey, instead of receiving gifts, he's like, take Rolo in.
Right.
Like this kid need, that's why he looks at him as a kid, not a demon folk.
That's right, because even going back, because Lynn was like, hey, we can't help this kid. And then he's just like, why not? I already destroyed his lunch. I destroyed everything. Like, we gotta at least help him. And then Lynn's having her come in the moment like, man, what does that say about me? That I just judged this person. So everyone's having all these, like, revelations. And Noor's just like, yes, at least you can do.
And we find out the other kingdom behind it because they're getting ready to invade because they're like, okay, these monsters have done their job, so we just gonna come in and clean up the pieces.
Right.
And Lynn sends Noor flying once again.
And he's just like, we gotta talk about it.
He said he almost died. So.
Yeah, he was just like, I'm not looking forward to this type of travel.
But I guess the title does it best. He parried an army because I'm just seeing people flying,
yes,
swords and shields flying. He's keeping everyone alive. They had these big machines and they're flying.
Yes, he parries everything. Absolutely.
And the king, I love the king over there because he's like in all gold. His horse is gold plated.
I love how Oaken talks so much trash about him. He said, "What's that old man doing on the battlefield? You need to give it a rest." And he was like, "Aren't you?"
Oaken's so old.
But then I love how Darren the king, he's also talking about like, oh no, they have that crazy healer priest with them too. And he was like, I'm not looking forward to this. It was bad.
He thought he was gonna get killed. He was like,
he peed his pants. He peed his two hands twice in like 2 episodes.
They just followed the stench apparently to locate him.
It's true.
But after all of this, Noor reunites with all his instructors.
Yes.
That trained him.
Yeah.
And apparently the war ain't over. So now they got to go into enemy territory.
And so then all saddle up on the dragon.
And then once again, we see another, which just comes literally out of the blue. Like episode 11 through 12 was just like a flashback of his training.
Yes.
And it was like, I'm like, what are we talking about? So he had tons of potential as a child. He could do low hill without a blessing, could multitask.
Yeah.
And we kind of find out that all the instructors, they're named the Sovereign Six. The Sovereign Six wanted to work together and train him.
They were going to adopt him.
And then he would become the seventh. Right. But guess what? No one said anything. That goes back to it. No one said anything.
They had a little round table moment, and they're like, we have to do something. And then they're like, yeah, I agree. And then Sig, the one who's the swordsman, they're like, what do you say? And he's just like, I'm going on a journey to find Noor. I said, why is it a journey to find him?
No one knows where he lives. He's got that barrier.
Okay. He was like, I'm going on a long journey to find Noor. I said, what's happening?
Like, we need answers. They need to be able to find them.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was great. So everyone saddled up. Well, not everybody, because they were all like arguing about who's gonna go, and that was pretty great. So like we had Enos go. We had what's his name? The thief. Is it Craw? Karoo. Yeah, Karoo and one other person went with
the priest.
Did the priest come with us? I don't think the priest.
I thought the priest came because he does the interrogation.
He did. That's true. And then Lynn and her brother Rain went. That's right.
I kind of can't stand her brother.
I don't like Rain. I don't like how the father, like the king, is giving Rain all this responsibility. I was like, why don't you?
Because he doesn't want to do it.
I mean, that's also very clear too. But I was just like, we're having too much Rain time. Like the fact that Rain had a secret service following us.
Right.
Because here's the thing. Rain knew that Noor defeated the Emperor Goblin. Okay, and we know this because his secret service had the gem. Right. And I was like, why'd y'all do that? This could have been our proof to give to the guild so that we could have had more than 5 cents in change. right? Or they could have told the guild, like, hey, they actually defeated the emperor.
Pay him accordingly.
Right, absolutely. So I was just like, what's going on? So I feel like there was like a lot of being spies happening.
He also didn't like the fact that his dad gave him that sword.
That sword is like ridiculous. I mean, I need more information about this sword.
I mean,
I'm not gonna get it, and that's fine. But
what do you need? We got it. The sword is harder than Mithril. It's harder than Rocrium. I might be mispronouncing it. And at least in their world, they have something called mana metal. It's harder than all these things.
I know, that's why I broke Xandu's stuff. I get it. Yeah.
You know, and I love how ignorant Noor is. He's like, oh, it's so nice and wide. He used it as a bigger shovel.
To clean out gutters. That guy was like, hey, Noor, what you done with the old lady's house? Can you get my gutters next? He was like, I'll be right over it.
You know, he didn't want to accept it, and the king had to lie to him, but he's like, oh, it's a replica. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And he's like, I can't believe he's giving him that. You found it on your event. Like, Rain is just envious.
He is jealous.
You know, I think that's what this is.
He's jealous, and that's fine. But no, so I appreciate the fact that, the other kingdom basically had a coup at the same time when we came to show up. Because, like, Noor classically coming through the window.
Well, yes.
I mean, classically in the sense of like he's constantly being slung somewhere and he doesn't want to.
Yes, they were like, they couldn't take it no more. They said, like, what you're doing is wrong. Like, we need to get him out of power,
Right. And his people in command were just like, the knights was like, the king was like telling the knights, do what I say. And he said, handle it. He said, all right. And I was like, that's not the type of all right you want to hear? I said, he gonna leave and not come back. And then he had his goons who were just like, he said, I told you to do this thing. And he was like, okay, but the mana tracker's on. He said, it doesn't matter. And then once it happens and, Noor parries everything, and they're just like, it didn't work. And then he's just like, wait, where are they going? He said, well, we told you that it's going to it's tracking mana, so it's going to go to where, our things. And he said, who told you to do that? And they're all just like, you know what? Each one quit. Like, hey, I'm your superior officer. I'm leaving.
Well, one was trying to quit the whole time. he kept on cementing his resignation.
That's true. But this is the last straw. So he was like, I'm done. And all three of them left in the elevator. Like, we're out of here. And then the knights show up like, we got to get this guy out of here.
He was out of control. It wasn't helping the people anymore.
It wasn't helping the people anymore. So there was that with that kingdom. That was great. We handled that negotiation. Rain's like, hey, the least you can do is like feel the pain of like at least 15 of my people. I feel like that's fair. And then that's right, the priest was there because he was just like, don't worry, I'll make sure you survive. He said, don't worry, make it so that you don't die. He said, I think that's fair. And no, he peed his pants 3 times. There you go. There is 3 times.
The kingdom had payments to make.
Yes.
This was a war. Like there's consequences here.
There are consequences.
So yeah.
But yeah, so that's basically the show, and then it ends like, where they do the recap of like going back to his training days and, just learn more about like his experience and how each instructor was really impressed with him and his skills, but never told him.
He had his perspective of it, and they had theirs.
Absolutely. And, he ended up becoming an urban legend and people, like someone that they all aspired to be. And,
it just seems like it just happened. Like it doesn't look like a season 2.
I don't think there's going to be a season 2. I think
this is what it is.
It's done. I feel like it's done. He's forever at F rank. I don't think that's ever going to change.
He will be the the unofficial 7th sovereign.
Apparently.
It's
fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
He's fine helping the people. So I think he's just fine.
And that's the thing that I feel like we as watchers need to be. Stuff can end.
And that's okay.
Yeah, everything doesn't need a continuation, a live action.
That's right.
Like stuff can just end.
It can end, and I'm okay okay with how it ended. I was like, that's fine.
Sure.
I mean, I still want to know where he lived and what that barrier was about, because I didn't get any answers about that. I said, is he a different type of species of person? I said, what's going on?
I just took it as his dad was really high level. And that's who put, you know, his parents must have clearly put the barrier up.
They were just like, don't go past these trees.
Right. You know, they put the barrier up.
And that's fine, but I was just like, what's going on? I feel like that's my only question. I just needed more information there. But other than that, I'm content with the show. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good show.
Excellent.
Good recommendation. I Parry Everything. It's a good chill watch. A lot of shenanigans.
It's on High Dive.
It's on High Dive.
Gotta catch it on High Dive.
Absolutely. So
that's I Parry Everything.
I Parry Everything. All right.